Hey, are you on your way somewhere right now? Maybe you're sitting in your car, or on a train, or some other form of public transit. One of our listeners told me that we're a good length when she goes for a jog. As for me, well, I'm on my way to our main recording studio here in Bern to record the next episode of the Swiss Connection. That's right, I'm Susan Masika, walking up a steep hill near the River Aare and headed into one of the main plazas of Bern. Now, however you do it, getting around takes a lot of energy. And unless you're doing it on your own power, you need some sort of fuel. And this can generate a lot of CO2. Switzerland missed its target to reduce its carbon footprint in 2020. That year, the nation emitted over 46 million tons of CO2. That's 14% less than in 1990, but it was supposed to be 20% less to keep up with international climate goals. Still, there are some promising developments when it comes to electric mobility in Switzerland, both on the roads and up in the air. Well, now I've caught my breath and I'm sitting in the studio with my colleague Simon Bradley. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Susan.
Well, you've boldly gone where few others have gone before you. You were up in the air on the world's first certified electric aircraft. I'm glad you made it back down safely.
Thanks very much. I'm finally back down to Earth, and it was an amazing flight over the Fribourg Alps in western Switzerland. I was doing a report for Swissinfo on electric planes, the development of electric planes, and I was lucky enough to get invited up to take a flight in the Pipistrel Velis Electro, which is a new plane that completed its maiden flight in Switzerland.
So what does this plane look like? I'm trying to picture it.
It's a small two-seater. It's a very basic plane which is used for pilot training. It's not a large plane. It can only take two people. It can't take large groups or can't travel long distances. On the outside, it looks like a typical noisy combustion engine, but on the inside, it's pretty basic. It's got simple controls, very simple dashboard and cockpit.
So what happened when you got there?
Well, I got to the hangar at Ecouvelin, which is in Canton Fribourg, and I met the pilot outside, and together we pushed open the hangar door, which was very heavy, and inside this very cute little plane waiting, charging up. It'd been charging for the last few hours. So together we pushed the plane out of the hangar just outside so that he could prepare it for takeoff.
Oh, wow. Pushing a plane, that's a bit different than your usual workload.
Yeah, it's pretty light. I mean, it's about 900 pounds. And so Marc Corbeteau, who was the pilot, an experienced pilot and Swiss entrepreneur who runs Alpine airplanes. Together we pushed it out, and then he talked me through the checklist of various things about the plane before we took off.
Doors are closed. Controls free and correct. Flaps free and correct. Set takeoff. Trim is neutral. We're ready for departure.
Okay.
Ready for departure? Okay, let's go.
A simple pullback on the control stick between his legs, and we were airborne, effortlessly climbing above the rolling countryside towards Gruyere, the capital of cheese, and the low, snow-capped Fribourg Alps. The first thing that hits you about this electric plane is the noise, or lack thereof. Officially, the electric engine has a maximum noise level of 60 decibels. When you're inside the tiny cockpit, it sounds a little bit like a noisy dishwasher.
So it's half the noise than an ordinary plane, and you will be in the plane. However, when you're on ground, you can hear the propeller when taking off, up to the position you are. Once past your position, you will not hear it anymore. It's just like a and it's gone. And all the circuit around, you don't hear the aircraft. It's really only the point where it is taking off that you can hear the propeller. The nicest was in the very beginning with Alpha Electro. There is a guy up there, really, he's his house is below the circuit. And he called me in the evening, the very first day when I operated this aircraft, and he said, look, this was the first time I was lying in my pool watching the aeroplanes and I couldn't hear anything.
Mark also teaches others how to fly and rents out Velis Electro planes to Swiss flying schools. He says noisy airfields and flying schools are the ideal customers.
The endurance is only 45 minutes, which is a typical training session. Here in Equans, this gives you about 7 touch and goes, 7 circuits, or you can do some aerial work outside and do in the end maybe 3 circuits. So it's perfect for a training session. However, the mission is not really cross country, even though it's only a small 2-seater. However, it is a big step for aviation.
Besides pushing the plane out of the hangar, did you get to push any buttons or help steer the plane?
Well, I didn't fly myself, but the controls seem pretty simple, and the plane is very stable in the air. I got a sense of that when we cruised above the mountain valleys and Mark suddenly took his hands off the control stick. So compared to a normal plane, it's much quieter, lighter, simpler to fly and easy to charge. The price for a new one is similar to other training planes, yet it's much cheaper to run.
The price is one thing, but the operation cost of this aeroplane is really lower than the ordinary planes. You can imagine the maintenance on these aeroplanes is basically it's the check of the controls. It might be about a third of the cost of a standard aeroplane. So here is where you save some money. And on the energy, of course, we are using solar power here, but also if you take the energy from the grid, you charge the batteries with maybe 4 to 5 Swiss francs compared to 30 francs on the thermal powered aeroplane.
What you just heard then was a traditional combustion engine plane taking off. As he was saying about their solar energy, the deal is that when a flying school buys one of the planes, they also get solar panels, enabling them to charge the plane with clean energy.
Oh no, when you talk about planes and solar panels, it makes me think of the Solar Impulse, that Swiss plane that's wings were covered in them. It broke records, including the first solar plane to fly through the night and around the world, and it also had the longest non-stop solo flight. It was almost 120 hours, I think. Do you remember?
I do. And that project has sparked others. For example, there's the H-55, an electric plane spin-off by Solar Impulse's co-founder, André Borschberg. There's a growing number of electric plane and electric propulsion projects in Switzerland.
But the Solar Impulse could only hold the pilot, and the plane that you were on was built for just 2 people. So when are we going to see larger electric planes in the skies?
A huge amount of development's going on right now, but bigger, fully electric planes in the 150 to 200 passenger short-haul bracket probably won't come before 2030, 2040. What we'll definitely see in the next 10 years are hybrid electric planes carrying around 100 people.
Okay, so compared to regular planes, these electric-powered ones are quieter and cheaper to fly. Plus, they don't need jet fuel. But there is a catch. They need big batteries.
Yeah, exactly. The batteries are the weak point for electric planes. If you compare with electric cars, for example, there's been huge development in electric cars and batteries and electric systems. But for aviation, there hasn't been the same pace of development. And the problem is that batteries are still far too heavy. Now, inside the Velis Electro, you've got a small engine, but each battery weighs 150 pounds. And you've got one in the nose and one in the cabin just behind. They're connected in parallel. This is sort of, if one fails, you've got a backup.
Oh, good.
But yeah, it's reassuring. But you've got the 2 batteries together weigh about a third of the total weight of the plane. So this really restricts how far you can fly, essentially 45 minutes.
The mission is clearly the flight training. So we did some excursions up to Norderney at the North Sea and also down to Marseille. The logistics are quite heavy. So you really have to think about where to go down and where to recharge, and you have to check all the available energy there and so on. So
Mark was telling me that on these longer flight challenges across Europe, his team members were following the plane in cars carrying chargers. He's confident, however, that with current research and innovation in batteries, when he has to replace the Velis Electro's batteries in 2 years' time, the new ones will be much more powerful and double his time in the air. He says Switzerland should soon see larger electric planes for regional flights, but he's betting on hybrid electric models and hydrogen fuel cells. These, he says, will have much higher energy density and are lighter, offering more power.
we believe that in future we can go in the direction that aeroplanes are really noise-free. Let's say even though we have bigger and heavier aeroplanes, we still can imagine pure electric takeoff. Maybe you have to switch on the hybrid later on or things like this.
For a lot of people, electric planes probably sound really futuristic, like something that's still light years away. But electric cars are another story. Last year, car dealers reported a huge surge in sales of electric vehicles worldwide. And there were tough new emissions targets in Europe, and these led to triple-digit growth in Germany, France, and also the UK. Now, Norway, an electric car pioneer, became the first nation where electric car sales overtook those powered by other means. Norway is often put forward as a model for countries that want to boost the number of electric vehicles, but is it even realistic? And should Switzerland try to follow this Norwegian model? Simon here has also been reporting on the Swiss electric car revolution.
That's right. The Swiss are early adopters when it comes to electric cars. You see a lot more of them on the roads and streets here. There was even a Formula E race in here in the capital, Bern, a couple of years ago, I think.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And why is this? Why is it? Where does this interest come from? I'd say there are a number of factors behind it. Switzerland's a small country. People generally travel short distances. The Swiss are also pretty environmentally aware, so they're interested in this kind of technology. And it's a rich country. I mean, let's face it, the Swiss can afford these kind of cars, which are pretty expensive. So we've seen slow growth in the number of e-cars over the last few years. And last year there was a big jump. And I think this was essentially because there were a lot more electric cars, electric models available.
We have to keep in mind that Switzerland wants to become carbon neutral by 2050. And transport alone causes a third of CO2 emissions, more than any other sector. Both politicians and industry experts agree that Switzerland really needs to step on the gas pedal if it wants to boost the uptake of electric vehicles long-term and make a dent in vehicle emissions. So, inspired by Norway and the UK, some Swiss politicians are really pushing for strict deadlines to phase out fossil fuel-powered vehicles.
We are in a climate crisis. If this transition is technologically possible and economically viable, it needs to happen as fast as possible.
That was Adele Torrance of the Green Party. She was talking to Swiss Public Radio. The thing is, when you look at the question of subsidies and incentives, Switzerland and its federal system is a real patchwork. The cantons, they only offer limited tax breaks and incentives, and they're not coordinated. There's no real clear federal strategy, I'd say. Now, the experts I talk to, I mean, many of them are divided over the need to subsidise electric vehicles. I talked to Martin Bolliger, who's head of the technical department at the Touring Club Switzerland, and this is what he said.
Norway Norway is giving money for one point and advantages to electric cars, bus lanes and parking lots and electricity at the parking lot. I think to make going electric easier is actually a good way to promote electric vehicles in Switzerland. Direct subsidies for buying electric cars is very efficient.
I also got in touch with the Transport and Environment Association, and they told me that they think Norway's strategy of subsidising electric cars is far too expensive and not really necessary in a country like Switzerland. They also believe that it's possible to sell electric cars without any national incentive strategy, and that indeed the new CO2 law that people will be voting on in June 2021 offers good incentives, and that it will actually force importers to sell more electric cars and more energy efficient cars. And then there's Francois Lorner, who's president of the influential car importer association Auto Schweiz. He's also very dubious about the Norway model being something for Switzerland.
I think we need to remain realistic. Norway is decades ahead of the other countries. To want to impose mobility without combustion engines by 2025 in a country like Switzerland, which is completely under-equipped in recharging stations, is utopian.
That's the thing, isn't it? On the one hand, you have more and more Swiss drivers interested in e-cars, but they need the right infrastructure to keep the cars running. Currently, there are almost 6,000 public charging stations dotted around Swiss cities and towns.
That's right. And we shouldn't forget that by the end of 2021, there'll also be fast charging stations at 50 motorway rest areas and at most gas stations in Switzerland. Some people told me that this density of charging points per vehicle is above average in Europe. But some other people tell me that actually the problem is that these are in the wrong locations. I spoke to Anthony Patt, who's Professor of Climate Policy at the Federal Technology Institute in Zurich, and he believes that Switzerland's not doing too badly when it comes to infrastructure, but he fears a possible roadblock in the years ahead.
The biggest factor whether someone's interested in buying an electric car in Switzerland seems to be, can I charge this thing at home? And my sense is that there are a lot of places to charge, and it's a pretty dense network out there, but it's kind of built around the wrong model of how people actually charge. So a lot of towns and villages, including the village where I live, have tried to do their part, and they've put in 1 or 2 charging stations somewhere in the town square or something, but it's actually not what people want. They're kind of in the wrong place, and they're kind of useless because they're not close enough to where people actually live, and they don't allow the people to park their car there overnight and leave them there and forget about them while they charge.
At the federal level, the Federal Energy Office is financing a number of pilot projects in places like Zurich and Basel, but it admits that there are very few of these urban chargers available on the streets. When you compare countries like Switzerland and Norway, you see the problem quite clearly, because in Switzerland, 57% of people rent their apartments, whereas in Norway, 84% of people own their own homes. So it's really much easier for Norwegians to charge their vehicles outside their homes.
So what you're saying is that if you don't own your own home, then you probably don't have a garage either. And if you're renting a parking space, then you just don't have that much control over it as a tenant. I mean, a tenant can't just hire an electrician to install an outlet to charge a car, or at least not without permission from the landlord.
Exactly. Now, one solution for Switzerland may come from its neighbour, Germany. Last year, it passed a law that gives tenants the rights to install electric vehicle charging stations, and it also made it compulsory for building owners to upgrade wiring, so for these kinds of chargers. Will this happen in Switzerland? It's hard to say. Currently, nobody's lobbying for it, so it may be very, very difficult.
The fact is the market might fix it when it comes to chargers in buildings, But I don't see a way to deal with on-street parking unless the governments and municipalities get involved. Then again, it may be that the technology fixes this. In 5 to 10 years, technology could solve this problem. Electric cars might have batteries that are so big that they can charge so fast that people just treat them like gasoline cars. And so you don't need to charge them at home the way that we do now.
And as for the federal authorities, the Swiss Environment Minister has been discussing the issue with local governments and people from the car and real estate sectors. They say they want more ambitious targets, but there's still no timetable for improving the infrastructure. There will be a follow-up meeting later this year. So tell me, Simon, are you tempted to get behind the wheel of an electric car?
Well, we're thinking about it. We've got a dirty diesel car that we need to replace. But it's true that right now there are very few places to charge in Lausanne, where I live. One solution on the horizon may be a local car-sharing company that wants to electrify its fleet of cars and build a network of charging stations in the next 10 years. That looks interesting. But for the moment, I'm really happy with my new purchase, an electric bike that I can charge at home.
Well done. Hey, and thanks for taking us along on your reporting ride, Simon.
My pleasure.
You can read Simon's stories on our website at swissinfo.ch. And he and other members of our team are always on the lookout for the latest on this and other innovations that are happening in Switzerland. The Swiss Connection is a Swissinfo production. Have you been enjoying this podcast? Then please help others find us by giving us a 5-star review. The reporting for this episode was by Simon Bradley. And after his joyride over the Alps, I hear that he may have decided to take flight lessons after all. And as usual, taking us on musical flights of fancy is our composer, Michele Andina. Studio engineer Donnie Wheeler keeps an eye on the time and makes sure that we land safely. Signing off for all of us here, I'm Susan Masika.
Do you want to polish your knowledge about Swiss elections, referendums and political parties, while at the same time learning more about the quirks of the political system in Switzerland? If that's the case, our newsletter course is just what you need. Each week for a month, we'll send you a free installment explaining the most important details of how Swiss democracy works. Our course teaches you who's eligible to vote in Switzerland, what the different parties stand for, how election and popular vote results are implemented, and what distinguishes Swiss democracy from other political systems. Our crash course is interactive, like democracy itself. Your questions will be answered on an FAQ page, and you can debate with other users and share your inputs and opinions. We will also provide links to multimedia articles and videos to help you better understand the Swiss democratic system. Please join us and sign up for the free Democracy Crash Course newsletter at www.swissinfo.ch/democracy. That's www.swissinfo.ch/democracy.